Ever wonder how lifestyle changes can unlock communication for our children on the spectrum? My name is Natalie Pelto, and I am the co-founder of Blue Life RX, and we are a health and wellness company focused on bringing lifestyle medicine to the world and healthcare. And my focus is on our kids with autism and their families so that we can help them get to the independence to unlock their communication and so that they can give their gifts to the world and change the future direction that we are going as a society for our kids. So I am so happy to be here. I'm here to kind of provide you with a few different structures or kind of rules, or I don't like rules, I hate rules actually, but more like guidelines or tips on how to get your children to better communication. I think this is such an important topic because we never ever dive into the lifestyle portion of communication for children. Our focus is generally very focused. If you continue, for example, if you continue on just a therapy path, you're missing such a huge component. And for many families, they're here or you're here because you're not getting the results that you feel like you could in the therapy setting. And this was our story. Not that our therapy, like my son loved our speech therapist. She was amazing. But he didn't engage with her at all. And as we basically changed our focus to a more lifestyle approach, and this is what we see in our program, we started to see more engagement. And so then therapy worked. To give an example of this, we have an amazing mom in the program who has started her child in our program after being in speech and different therapies. And interestingly enough, this child who is no longer in therapy, has not been in therapy for quite some time, like for about 6 months, I think was what she said. He's also in swimming lessons. So when she brought him to a swimming lesson and when she went to get him when he was done with his instructor, the instructor said, wow, like speech is just doing such amazing things for your child. He asked me this and he did this and he communicated this with me. And she didn't correct the instructor because it is such a new, first of all, it would create such a much longer conversation when you're trying to leave somewhere. But it's such a newly way to treat autism. And so what she did though was she came back and she said, my son has not been in speech for 6 months and his communication has just exploded without any help. And so that's one way to look at why this is a component. It's almost like it unlocks a door to cognitive function with memory and behavior and attention and focus that allows for speech or therapies to do what they are meant to do, which is to help our children learn through repetition. Okay, so let's dive into some of these tips as to how this can actually help your child to unlock that communication skill. So the first is to kind of make sure that you have structured play routines. Social connections, one of the things that we do teach within the program is social connections. Social connections in a safe environment for your children can be the difference between your child mimicking peers or not even having that opportunity. Another really interesting story that I just heard yesterday, actually, so I'm going to share it, is one of the moms who's been in the program for about 2 years now and has not, like her son has not had a play date, we'll say, in about throughout the entire summer. And when they created that very safe social connection with no screens around, he engaged with this child. It's like, she said, it's like I have a whole new child within just this environment that I never would have thought was possible. So again, just another area to think about, to have these structured play areas. This looks like also having having stations where children can play and have side-by-side play. Providing opportunities to match where their social skills are at is also quite important. And if you don't know, just keep the room minimal and have very specific areas that have specific toys that they could either engage together or separate. That's also important to have area. In our case, we always had different areas where there was the opportunity to play together, but also the opportunity to separate and play alone. And this was really helpful to my son and his friend at the time. And we really provided this very consistently. At least once a month, we had a structured play date. And it just so happened that his friend was neurotypical. My son is now neurotypical. So they're still friends. And it is really fun to see their friendship and relationship grow. So the second tip that I want to share is nutritional adjustments. This is my area of expertise. Lifestyle medicine is like in its entirety my area of expertise, but nutrition plays such a key role in brain development that we can't ever skip it. For just a communication, and especially when we're talking about unlocking our child's potential for communication, when we're absorbing information and our receptive language or our receptive functions are accepting information. So we have our receptor site. It's like a little area that has a little spoke with a little cup on it. When a piece of message comes across and we get bombarded by billions of pieces of information almost every second, for us to filter through all that, to communicate, for me to look at this camera, to intentionally express what I want to share, there is a lot going on in my brain all at the same time. And in order for all these pieces to come together, they require nutrients. And so, for example, we need calcium, sodium, just to give the electrical signal, which is a very small electrical signal, but to pass the information I want to express onto what we call through an axon on a neuroreceptor. So if we do not have the neuroreceptors built, so these are the information, think of it as the tail of the piece of the cell. So we have different cells throughout our body. They have different shapes. But for our neurons, they look very different. They have a tail, and then they have the nucleus, and then they have all of these spread out. They kind of look like alienish, to be honest. But if those are not formed properly and we're not able to kind of pass the messages across, what is the expectation for our children to be able to express what they're even receiving? And to top that off, if they're suffering from sensory processing because they do not have the receptor sites to accept messaging, then we have an entire system to fix, not just one component. It's not just fixing cognitive function, which is a very simple term to explain a very complex system in the brain. Interestingly enough, though, even though it's a simple term and it is a complex system, it is very simple to fix. And that it does come from the nutrients that we provide our brain. Ultra-processed foods equal blocking of receptor sites. If we eat nourishing, health-related foods that are helpful for brain development, which is pretty much just eating vegetables, fruits, the color of the rainbow, and eating upwards to 35 to 50 plants per week, then we are providing the brain what it needs. And I know some families are gonna be like, wow, 50 plants per week. To put that into perspective and to just give you more of a no fluff approach is that if an FMT, which is a fecal transplant, which we know is becoming more popular in the autism world, they generally, if you have a very good physician, will not even accept you as a patient because the fecal transplant will not take, because you're not giving it the nutrient or not the fibers needed to feed it if you're not eating 50 plants per week. So they won't even take you if you're not eating that. So that's to kind of take away the fluff and to really put in the perspective of how important it is to bring these foods in, not just for our brain, even though that's what we're talking about today for communication, but to feed our microbiome, which is our ecosystem that creates an environment of reduced inflammation in the brain, which we also need. So rule number 3, or tip number 3, is to dive into enhanced physical activity. Now, for a child, this is obviously not going to look the same as for an adult. We're not going to put our kids at the gym. We're not going to get them a personal trainer. What we're going to do is create an environment for them to play. Play is the form of exercise for children. And to put that into perspective, children need to be moving between the ages of 3 and 18, 60 minutes per day. And for under that, it's even more. I believe it's about 120 minutes as they're learning. So as we think that babies are always moving. They're actually learning. And they're creating, that's why they're creating cognitive enhancements and building a lot of their neuroplasticity and neuroreceptors, and brain development is happening based on the things that they're doing as babies. And this is why primitive reflexes is so popular in the autism world as well. What we see in our program that is more of a lifestyle-based program, we see the families that actually go back that have older kids and do primitive reflexes in combination with nutrition completely see some of the best outcomes. But if you have a young child, you don't have to go do that right away. You can just dive right into play as much as possible. And so this looks like offering environments to play tag, or offering safe environments for walking outside and exploring the world. We, as a family, I would always notice such a like completely drastic change with my son when we would bring him for walks in the woods, because not only was he getting exercise to the level that he felt necessary. We always, like at the time he was probably about 4, we would bring the stroller with us on some, safe walks and woodland walks. And it was a game changer. He would come out, he would get the aromatics from the trees, oxygen from the trees, no need for hyperbaric chambers if you have a forest around. And his cognitive function was always heightened after our woodland walks. And so we continuously did that and moved to a place where we could do that more. So tip number 4 is to help our kids with visual and sensory environments. So we know that children are either going to fall in the realm of sensory avoidance on the spectrum, especially around food, but there's also some that fall in the realm of sensory seeking, and some fall in the realm of both, avoidant to some things and sensory seeking to others. And so if it's something, when we can engage 2 of the senses or more together, we have a higher retention of words, or higher retention of the ability to communicate, because we have either pleasure or we remember things when we're either stimulated with pleasure or pain. We obviously don't want to do the latter of pain, but we want to focus on things that are going to stimulate multiple senses at the same time. So visual cues are super helpful. Offering a very organized living space so your child knows where sensory appropriate things are, and to engage and encourage these expressions. So the fifth tip is to focus on sleep. So for our child's communication, number 1, perspective-wise, again, studies are always good to know, is about 54% of our kids are not sleeping well on the spectrum. And when we're in it and we don't have a medical background, or we don't understand what happens when we're sleeping, it just seems like we're having restless nights. We know we're cognitively tired. We know that our kids are whiny and miserable, but we don't truly understand what happens throughout the sleep. So this is, to keep it as simple as possible, is when we sleep, there are different stages of sleep that are going to help us remember things. There are stages of sleep that are going to help us detoxify not just our emotional baggage that we've had throughout the day. And for kids, this happens a lot, but it's also going to detoxify the exposures we've had throughout the day, in heavy metal form, in food form, in chemical form, that are kind of hanging around there. And if our body is not capable of getting rid of these things because we're not sleeping well, that's just more accumulation for, to be done tomorrow. And then if we're not sleeping sleeping well tomorrow, it's a self-perpetuating cycle. And if we're eating ultra-processed foods and not having our circadian clock stimulated, like proper light exposure, over light exposure from screens, there are so many pieces to the sleep puzzle that can be impacted that we cover in the Blue Life Autism program. But it is so important to have this understanding that for our children to be able to express themselves clearly with words, they need to have the ability to remember what they are being taught. And memory and regeneration and holding on to both types of memory, which is habit building and long and short-term memory, happen during sleep. So in conclusion, to recap everything we talked about, because we did just talk about a lot, some of the focuses when we want our children to have better communication is to give them social connections and structured play routines. Have nutritional adjustments that are going to set your child's brain up for development and memory and accepting of receptive acceptance and expressive acceptance. It's a whole system that goes in and out. Visual and sensory environments, physical activity, and consistent sleep patterns are what are going to unlock that door that you want so badly for therapy to work when they're going to these appointments. If you like this video, please make sure to like, subscribe, and if you know another parent that could absolutely use this, please share it with them. Have a great day. See you in the next video.